Thank you both for being here. And so pleased to come to to be with you and to see you here in Eagle Pass. So I want to start with the elections because these elections and the results and the news from these elections have a long tail. We're going to be talking about these election results for some time. Senator Flores, you've been a Republican for a long time. You've seen Republican politics in Texas for a long time. We are used to these elections being boring. The Republicans win largely at the statewide level. Democrats lose at the statewide level. It's pretty much like the definition of insanity. We do the same thing over and over and expect a different outcome, right? But this time, the Democrats picked up 12 seats in the House. The Democrats picked up 2 seats in the Senate. We had the closest U.S. Senate race in 40 years, going back to when John Tower was elected to the Senate. 2.6 points separated Senator Cruz and Congressman O'Rourke. Lieutenant Governor Patrick, your new boss, although they're your boss, I understand.
They're the boss.
Right? But the presiding officer of the Senate won by 5 points. These are the closest elections we've had in a generation. What do you think happened, Senator?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you all for allowing me the opportunity to come visit with you, and it's good to see you again. And I was here last night. Good to see you all again. You know, it's refreshing anytime the people get out and exercise their sacred vote, and the more we get out and inform, we have the saying in South Texas is "La cara hace milagros." You got to show up. And I think that what for us as Republicans, where we held all the major offices, the statewide offices,
right?
But more people came out, and we, of course, like in my campaign, we spent 3 years coming out to the communities. We came to Eagle Pass, we went to Fort Stockton, we went to the west side of San Antonio. We showed up. I think that a lot of that is reflected in the vote. Whether it's Democrat or Republican, both of us said that's a message that should resonate from here on, is that no matter which party you are, you need to show up. Don't take people for granted. Understand that your vote is very powerful and will shape policy and shape the direction of the state and the nation. Yeah. And to offer them the choice. I applaud when we have competition, because competition gives people the opportunity to pick. And then we have to make sure and go out and say, this is what we stand for. This is what product we will deliver. And this is how we will serve you. And so I think that people came out and expressed their vote. And that we, of course, speaking for my party, we will continue to get out and reflect the face of Texas and be more ever present in our community.
I like the fact that you said politics is about having a choice. I agree with you. I think that too often in Texas of late, Senator Flores, the major parties have looked at the redistricting map and said, we can't win that seat, so we're not going to put a candidate up. And this time you had more candidates contesting more races than before. It is a little bit like the tradition of American capitalism. Coke and Pepsi, we want to have a choice, right? If the Republicans are Coke, Texas chose a lot more Pepsis this year than normal. Do you think it's a rebuke of the Republicans that the Democrats had their best election cycle in a generation? Or if not, what do you think it was?
Well, first of all, I don't think it was a rebuke. I think that it was an expression of a turnout based on, we had most of the vote, for example, and the trend has been continuing over the years in the urban areas.
Right.
It's been more Democratic.
Which are more Democratic.
More Democratic. And, of course, the rural areas, very Republican. And even so, in this district, for example, 5 Democrat-leaning counties flipped red in my election. But so it has to be with who goes out and gives their message that resonates the most.
Right.
And works their constituents and delivers the message and the choice.
Right.
So I think, whereas I think, and with all due respect, I don't think it was a blowout. I think all of us could do better in reaching out to the boss and letting you know what our positions are and what we stand for.
Right.
And then the people will speak, and I will respect that.
Representative Nevárez, I would agree with Senator Flores. It was not a blowout. You guys didn't win any statewide offices. You kept the Senate race close, but you know what you call a Republican who wins a Senate race by 2.6 points as opposed to 20 points. You call him senator, right? Doesn't make a difference. A win is a win is a win. You picked up 12 seats in the House, 2 in the Senate. That's great, but it was not a blowout.
No, it wasn't, but it was a thunderclap. And the thunderclap tells us this is, and Senator Flores is correct. If you look at, and I liken it to a fever, and I think the fever broke. And look at what happened in these suburban counties where, if you told me that Williamson County was going to go blue and we were going to pick up 3 seats, including the one in western Travis County, which is consistently and delivers well for Republicans.
Well, in fact, was drawn to be a Republican district.
Right. Yes, and then not winning because the court said they had to redraw the maps. I mean, we won with Republican maps. And Senator Flores is correct about this, is the rural counties, they tend to stay a little bit more red, but the truth is they elect the type of Republican that more reflects the values of the state across the board. And if you look at the more detrimental positions, in my opinion, social positions that could affect an election, they don't come from the rural areas. They come from the exurbs and the suburbs because, well, I don't even know because. It may be because things are more transient. It seems to be easier pickings there, but the suburban counties sent a message. There were, 3 or 4 seats in Tarrant County that if we had actually paid attention to them and put some money in them, I think we would have turned them. But it didn't seem realistic. I mean, you look at, Matt Shaheen's seat, Jeff Leach's seat, Jonathan Stickland's
Jonathan
seat.
Stickland, who's a state representative from Bedford, Tarrant County, did not even get to 50%. Won only because there was a libertarian in that.
And if you had told me, I think Jonathan won I think he won 80% of the vote last time.
Yeah. Well, the fact is, what you say about the suburbs, I want to ask Senator Flores if he feels the same way. The suburbs seem to be slipping away from Republicans in the state of Texas. It was Williamson County north of Austin. It was Hays County south of Austin. It was Fort Bend County outside of Houston. It was Denton. It was Collin County. A lot of these counties that had been reliably Republican seem to be entertaining the idea that maybe Democrats aren't all that bad. Have you done something? Has your party done something to turn the suburbs off, Senator Flores?
Well, y'all hear me? To answer that question specifically as to what my party has done, it would be unfair to me to say they did this or did that because I don't know the answer to that. I can only answer what we did here, what I did in Senate District 19 to answer that question. We got 48% of the vote in Bexar County, and then we had overwhelming vote support from Democrats and Republicans in the rest of the 16 counties, the rural counties, but especially the suburban counties around San Antonio are very red.
Right.
They're very red.
So they may be outliers compared to other suburban counties.
I mean,
in
we're
the
talking
state.
about Medina. We're talking about Atascosa. Where all the counties around Bexar, suburbia, if you will,
right,
are very red.
right.
And even in the city itself, which I'm proud to represent, we held our own with 48%.
Right.
And Representative Nevárez talked about investment, money. Yes, money's very important. I mean, absolutely. But my first round, when I got on the 31st, the top Democrat opponent spent $500,000. I spent less than $50,000.
Right. Money is not everything.
And I still came out first.
Right.
So now it does help. In the second round, it helped tremendously.
Right.
But it's more of what I said earlier. It's about who gets out and works and reflects the communities. But the representative is totally correct on that. Yeah. And we just have to get out and not take you all for granted.
Right.
You know, the fact that I'm the first Hispanic Republican senator, I'm not going to be the last. The Hispanic population will be the majority in just a few years.
And so if Republicans compete and ask for the votes of the Hispanic community, maybe it would be more up for grabs.
We are generally a conservative population.
Right.
We believe in God and family and country.
Right.
And we're very conservative.
Yeah.
But we have to spend more time with the community, FaceTime.
Yeah.
And that's what we will do moving in the future. From my experience, that's what's worked.
Representative, a former state legislator, Aaron Pena, who you may have overlapped with briefly in the legislature from Edinburgh, switched parties after the 2010 election from Democrat to Republican. He'd been a Democrat in the legislature for a long time, and he switched to the Republican Party. In part, he said, because the Democratic Party of Texas, he believed, took the Hispanic community for granted. And he believed the only way to advance the cause of his constituents in Austin was to switch parties, because he said Republicans have to compete, Republicans have to represent Hispanics, and ultimately Hispanics need to consider their vote to be up for grabs. Do you think that's legitimate?
I think it's legitimate when it's sincere, but let's look at what Aaron did after he became a Republican. He went up there and he carried a voter ID bill that did not reflect
Right.
what his constituency needed. He did it for a reason, and in my opinion, in that situation, Aaron was used. If you, I mean, let's drill down to it.
Right.
And so, I believe Senator Flores. It's true. We tend to be more conservative. We tend to be more issue oriented, and the truth is, as we go forward with Hispanic Republicans, Hispanic Democrats, these are the people that, as we look at the makeup of the state, I want to have those debates
Right.
with colleagues, like Jason Villalba, who's not coming back, because it reflects the state. But I don't want to have debates with Republicans, whether they're Hispanic or Anglo or otherwise, about nonsense. And if, to Senator Flores' point about the counties, suburban counties around San Antonio that are red, they are, but look at who represents them in the legislature. Republicans that actually are a little bit more moderate, a lot more moderate, and they tend to be engaged in the debates that actually mean something in the state, as opposed to the suburbs in Dallas
Right.
or outside of Dallas or Harris County. And so Senator Flores is correct, but you look at Aaron's move, I guess it was after 2010 and the map.
Right.
And not to criticize Aaron, but it was calculated,
Right.
and it did not reflect. I would be hard pressed to see somebody do that now for the purpose of trying to do what was done then. And again, it was used for a specific purpose, and it was to
Right.
sharpen a sword to use against his own constituents.
So the old cliche, all politics is local. We were reminded of this at election time. Representative Nevárez, people vote on the things that matter to them in their houses, in their communities, on their blocks. But this was also an election in which all politics was national to a degree. Midterm election, the president is not at the top of the ballot. This midterm election, absolutely the president was at the top of the ballot. He was the issue in a lot of local races. In fact, he himself said, I'm on the ballot. This is a referendum on me. Do you believe that President Trump affected the outcome of Texas elections on Tuesday?
There's no doubt. I was telling a national, we did an interview on CNN about a week ago, and the reporter had just moved to Irving. And I said, take a look at what's happening in your race. A week ago, the incumbent state representative was talking on TV and sending mailers about how she was bipartisan, moderate, worked across the aisles. This is a reflection of my district, which is true, and it's a very diverse district in Irving.
Yep.
Then about 3 days before the end of early voting, they dropped a mailer, or she dropped a mail piece that had pictures of brown people in it, and it said murderers, rapists, leprosy. I mean, it shifted 180 degrees, and the reason it shifted is because some pollster, some consultant said, you know what, you've mined every vote that you could mine. You got to go scrape the bottom of your shoe and figure out who's going to come to put you over the top. And the point I was trying to make...
And that's national politics.
And that's national politics.
National politics.
And I made a point to somebody, one, it was unnecessary because Trump was all over TV doing that himself. I mean, he's really good about doing that. But it just reflected the desperation and saying, you know what, this is the only way I can win. And I thought to myself, if you're going to go out, and she was going to go out, this is how you want to be remembered, by dropping a piece. And, that was a state representative, in my opinion, was very pragmatic. She had been on city
Right.
council. People that usually serve in municipal government, they're problem solvers. They know how to do things, and they get them done.
Yep.
But to make that leap, thinking this is the only way I can win, and she didn't, it just is flabbergasting, because that's what it was.
Senator Flores, was the president helpful to your party this election cycle, and do you have anything to apologize for to your constituents for the tone of politics nationally right now?
No, I don't have anything to apologize for.
Yeah.
I'm not going to apologize for the fact that we have the lowest unemployment in many, many years in our state and our nation. I'm not going to apologize that our military is stronger and being taken care of. I'm not going to apologize that we are energy independent. I'm not going to apologize that things are better for our businesses because regulations are being reduced, and as a result, we have jobs. If you don't have a job right now, frankly, you're not looking for a job. Well, in this district especially, where we have the 3 oil field plays, business is booming.
Right.
And so there's nothing to apologize for that. Those are the issues that we we and my campaign and the Republican Party are dealing with primarily
Right.
is big issues. The issues that we're not going to apologize for lowering your taxes and putting more money in your pocket, and because that's where it belongs. It belongs in your pocket and not in the pocket of the government.
So the national,
so we don't have anything to apologize
Yeah. So
for.
and so you believe, did the Trump agenda in your race, or do you believe in this district that the Trump agenda and the Trump administration's accomplishments to this point have been looked upon favorably?
I think that yes, they have been looked upon favorably because he has delivered. I mean, while yes, he's been, the Twitters and things like that. Yet he's not your politician, and I think that's what we need to have less of is politicians, and more people who deliver. And fact is that things have been delivered, and maintaining our position in the Senate in terms of having our Supreme Court justices that will be adhering to the Constitution is very important to the future of our nation. And of those things are the big items, which there's no apology for.
Right. So let's transition this conversation from Election Day to the next session. You'll gavel in January with the 86th legislative session, 31 senators, one of 31, 150 House members, one of 150. Pass a 2-year state budget. That's the only thing that you're obligated to do constitutionally is pass a budget and balance, but of course you're going to do a whole bunch of other things. The largest percentage, Representative Nevárez, historically of that budget's been public education. This is an issue that you know very well. You were a trustee of the school district board here, and the legislature spends, I wouldn't say a disproportionate amount of time, because it really is the most important issue for the future of the state on public ed. What do you think the legislature, the House, ought to be talking about, Republicans and Democrats, in the next session as it relates to public education?
Well, I know a couple of things, and I was mentioning this to the senator before we started. Look, we're going to hit the ground running. We got to do our supplementals because we got the hurricane issues that we got to deal with. So right away, we're going to be really busy with that, and that's unlike other sessions. We deal with supplementals, but it won't be as big as it will be this session.
And will you vote to take money out of the rainy day fund to pay backwards some of the costs incurred because of the hurricane and some other things that you kicked down the road in the last session?
We've done it to a certain degree the last 3 sessions, and frankly, we have to do it. I mean, I was telling somebody it literally rained a whole bunch, and so we have to do that. And so the other side of it is, we have about 80%, by the time we show up on January 14th or whatever day it is, we already have about 85% of the budget it's done. It's baked. And it's public education, Medicaid, and then paying back the debt from 2 years ago. And so we're left basically to scrap over 16-17%. I understand that a lot of the talk that I'm hearing now, and I know the senator's probably hearing it now too, is we have to start investing in infrastructure. I was telling Jorge Barrera earlier about the TRBs now. The universities have been told, hey,
these are tuition revenue bonds, debt used by universities to build buildings and refurbish facilities.
And so one of the things in particular that will affect us locally is Sol Ross has put in one for an academic building that'll be built, over there at as we affectionately refer to, Harvard on the Hill. And so it's before they'd been
Harvard is the Sol Ross of Massachusetts.
Exactly.
That's how we think of Harvard, right? Yeah.
And so before that had been a non-starter, and suddenly now it's a go, and that tells us, one, is we're shifting our priorities where we should. And I believe that's something that the senator and I can work on together because it's going to be important to the community.
That's a bipartisan issue.
Yes. Right? And so I think based on one of the outcomes, and it's a good outcome of the election, and it's good to have these discussions about, and these are things the senator mentioned that they're not owned by the Republicans. I mean, we work on those things too. I've been working on energy issues, natural resource issues since I got in the legislature. It's not a Republican.
Right. Water is not Democratic or Republican.
It's not. I mean, what the Republicans own right now and Trump does own is all the other stuff. I mean, that's him, 100%. But that being said, there's so many things that I've worked on across the aisle. I mean, I've made a living doing that, and going on 4 sessions now in the legislature, and that's not going to stop.
Right.
But to your end,
come to public ed. Tell me about what you think on public ed.
To your end is we've had this push the last 2 sessions about the legislature's ability to lower your property taxes. And the truth is, we don't have the power to do that. This is local. And the reason local taxes have gone steadily up is we have drawn out money or not funded public education at the levels we used to, and that forces the locals to do what they do, which is raise taxes. I thought, and I proposed this last session, that if we wanted to actually pump money in, but not do it crazily, but pump it in and also leverage it with saying, look, locals, if we start putting money back, we have to trigger it with some lowering of the tax rate. Not necessarily the rollback elections, which I
Right.
think is a mistake, but actually forcing the locals say, look, if by pro rata or whatever percentage comes in, you have to start adjusting your rate, because the whole point of us pumping more of our state dollars in is to lower the obligation of the locals.
But in the course of doing that, will you get more money into public education, or are you simply going to swap out one bucket for another bucket?
I think that what happened in 2011, when it was the largest decrease, if you will, in state funding for public education, I think we can't do that anymore. And I tell, nobody here is from Mississippi, right? God no? Okay. I always say, look, we're on our way to be Mississippi when it comes to public education. And people say, well, money doesn't solve all problems. I agree, but it'll solve a problem when you take indiscriminately $6 billion, over the course
And
of...
you're still climbing out of that hole.
Yes, because when
Right.
people, what I dislike about Austin is the hypocrisy of saying, hey, we put $2 billion in pub ed. Yeah, but you're already $6 billion behind. You're just funding growth. So for any politician, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, to say, hey, I will tell you honestly, we haven't put a dollar
Right.
in pub ed, because the truth is all we're doing is trying to catch up.
Yeah.
And so for any Republican to say or any Democrat to say, hey, I'm funding public ed, it's flat out a lie. It's not true, because we're
Right.
catching up.
Senator Flores, you're new enough to this that your perspective will be fresh. He's been in there for a number of terms. He's seen these fights. School finance seems to be the thing for years and years and years. We haven't been able to get our hands around, right? We're still arguing about it. What do you think we should do about this? States growing quickly, changing dynamically, 82,000 kids added to the public education system of Texas every year. Should we be putting more money into public ed? And if so, where should the money come from?
Thank you. Well, first of all, we have to be able to agree that in any issue, big issue, that we have to be able to agree what we want. And what do we want? We want to have the best educated children in the United States. We want it's not only good for our state, but it's good for business. It's good for the culture. We want to be able to do that. We have a constitutional requirement to fund public schools. It's I'm a very strict adherent to the Constitution, and so we have that constitutional duty to do that.
Right.
But we have to also agree that, and I know that we do. We want the same thing, because after all, the representative and I are here to serve you, and we're here for the same reasons. But how we go about it as a team, each of us brings our own skills and discipline and ideas to that. I think a lot of times we forget about what the ultimate goal is, and we get trapped in the weeds.
But I guess my question is, can you get, Senator, to the ultimate goal of creating the best public education system in the country? And we're far from that now, by general acknowledgement. Can you get there without spending significantly more on public education than you're spending now?
We have to have the well, I guess it's called, we have to dare greatly. And we have to dare greatly by asking very bold questions. And that means we look at the system itself.
Yeah.
And as the system itself, I was the chief game warden. I ran a division. And my division, the legislature and everyone else, the LBB said, you better run an effective and efficient organization, and then we're going to give you money. We want to know how it's spent. You're going to give us measures on how it's done. We had deliverables, but every session we had to adjust. It wasn't the same. It wasn't a baseline saying, give me more, give me more. I had to justify it, and I had to produce, and the people on the line had to produce the product. So we have to have as part of this equation to solving this. We have to look at the system itself and how effective. The Constitution also requires that it be efficiently run.
Right.
And so when those things are done, if it's once that due diligence is done, and that would mean that we would absolutely need and require the feedback from subject matter experts, especially the superintendents, and especially the parents, the ones who pay the bill.
So before you're prepared to spend more money on public ed, you want to be sure that the money we're spending now is being spent wisely.
That's due diligence.
Right.
And I'll say this, Evan, we've got, I served on the school board. We got 2 trustees back there, Chris, Jorge, our superintendent,
Yep.
back there, Gilbert. And I can tell you this because I served on the board and I've seen the work they do. They do an awesome job with little. And when I say little, it's not little because it's their fault. It's little because it's our fault. And so, again, I'm going to drill down into the weeds because
Right.
this is what I've been doing for 4 years. And it's
Yeah.
real, it's good to talk about the bigger idea of the efficiency and things like that, but I've lived those things. They live those things.
Right.
And as long as we do not live up to our constitutional duty, which I don't believe we have, then school districts like the Eagle Pass Independent School District, like Del Rio Independent School District, and in San Antonio, I think the comparison would be Harlandale, which is a very similar size. But I mean, I've got 16, 17, and I visited all of them, where they do so much with so little, and we are educating kids at the best level that we can. But the truth is, we the state,
Yeah.
we are abdicating the responsibility that we have to them. And so, and again, I'm going to drill down in the weeds because I've been there. My friend Diego Bernal, who's on the public ed committee, he's got a great quote. He says, "You cannot be the arsonist and then be the fireman." And what I mean by that is they choke the money off and then come in with a great plan to save us because you're not efficient and you're not doing your job. Well, we're not doing our job and we're not efficient because they've put school
You're not
district.
investing.
Yes, and so
Right.
now they come in with a plan, and I mean, I don't know where the senator stands on this, but I've been a staunch no on this, is vouchers. Vouchers do not work in our part of the state. They tried to carve it up so that urban Democrats and Republicans that might be for it will allow a Republican or a Democrat who represents a rural district to vote for it. But the truth is, they do not work. And again, you cannot be the arsonist and be the fireman at the same time.
Let me ask the senator quickly about that before I go on to something else. Are you for vouchers?
Yes,
Senator?
I am, and
Right.
I'll tell you why. It's because I believe that the parents are the ones that are the drivers of policy,
Right.
and not the bureaucrats.
Right.
And I'm going to be bold enough, as in someone new, and with new eyes,
Yep.
to ask the questions from both sides of the issue.
Right.
Why are you doing that? Why are we doing this? If you took $6 billion, what was the rationale? It couldn't have happened just because. There had to be a reason.
Well,
What
there
is
was a
that
pretty
reason?
significant budget shortfall, and a little bit like Willie Sutton, who robbed the banks because that's where the money was. The big percentage of the budget was in public education. You had to cut as much as you had to cut that year. You went after public
But
education
I'd like to know
because that's where the money was.
why that was. Why was that? How did that happen?
Yeah.
But maybe answer.
Yeah.
The
Quick on this, and then we'll come back.
at the
I like
time-
history, but I want to do the
well,
next.
and it's not really hard to stray from it. Susan Combs was our bean counter, at the
Comptroller
time,
of
yeah.
Texas
and,
Comptroller.
and
right.
we know now that she delivered a historically low.
Right. She was about $8 billion off, which was not a rounding estimate, a rounding error, right?
And
that
so,
was it. Yeah.
and we found out later that that wasn't correct.
Yeah.
And so we made a decision based on, and whether that was
Right.
an innocent
Well,
mistake.
that even Republican leadership acknowledged after the fact, if we knew that we were not $8 billion in the hole the way we were told we were, we would not have made that decision
and it seemed,
at the time.
And it seems odd that, and again, I'm not by any stretch of the imagination a conspiracy theorist, because I'm not. But it seems odd at the time when our children,
Right.
Hispanic children, become the majority of children in public schools, that we decide to make a rounding error in the budget that would drill
Right.
and blow a $6 billion hole in public education. And again, and I'll say this again,
Yeah.
because Diego, it's a great quote from Diego. You cannot be the fireman and be, or not. You cannot be the arsonist and be
then
the
the fireman.
fireman.
Senator Flores, what Representative Nevárez said about property taxes is a hot topic of conversation in the legislature. Is there a relationship? I think undeniably there's some relationship between the funding of public education at the state level and the decision by local authorities to raise revenue for education through the door of property taxes. The Senate has been particularly on this issue of property taxes are too high in Texas. Generally, nobody likes to pay property taxes, but property taxes also fund crucial services at the local level. You had a lot of mayors, commissioners, council members in cities that are both blue and red complain about the potential cut of property taxes because they felt like they couldn't do their jobs back home. Do you think property taxes need to come down? And if so, what's the proper mechanism to do that?
Thank you. That's one of the number one issues that I've heard across the board, whether it was in San Antonio, whether you were wealthy or whether you were lived in the smallest community.
No one likes to pay property taxes.
Well,
right?
we don't mind paying our fair share. It's just that it's not fair right now. The system is broke, and when we're dealing with what I heard most from the municipalities and the counties in the last proposal was that the thing that they objected, they didn't object so much that of course nobody likes the local control to be rested somewhat, and that's another topic. But it wasn't applied to everyone. It was just them.
Right.
But they would work with they're on the same boat. I mean, they don't like the system either. I mean, I can ask everyone in this room, how'd you like your last appraisal?
Right.
And I'm sure everybody's going to go, well, I didn't.
Right.
But
if that money, Senator, you know that if that money suddenly went away or there was less of it available, the community you live in, whoever you is, the community you live in has less money to do all the things that you've come to take for granted, right?
It's about providing a system that is fair and equitable. And right now it's not. And it is not just it's just not at the caps. My particular interest is down at the appraisal level,
right,
which is just a guess. And it's the most effective, the thing that impacts us the most. That system, for example, there's 254 different ways of coming in our state. Each county does it their own way.
Right.
Is that fair? That's not fair. And then each one comes up with their own methodology.
But of course, we by design don't. You like the Constitution, you say, and I believe you. We don't have a statewide property tax. We have 254 property taxes.
No, but how we arrive at what is fair and equitable is important. And so reforming the system, while still providing what we need to those critical things that we need: public safety, education, infrastructure.
Right.
But we need to start somewhere. We know that we need reform. I think if we're going to go, we need to go with a holistic approach. And in the next session, that also means addressing how we go about our appraisals to be done. Yeah. And then and discuss at the cap. I mean, if you have a 6% and the House says no, we want 4%. Let's have bold conversations, and let's come.
What you're referring to was a proposal that ultimately did not make, where the House and the Senate couldn't agree. It was the idea that
let us talk.
Right. If local authorities wanted to increase the property tax by above a certain percentage, they needed to go to the voters to make that happen. The House and the Senate could not agree on that amount. Then the governor came back in during the campaign and came up with a third amount. Right?
I'm committed to reforming the way property taxes are done, because I'm on a fixed income. I'm a retiree. I love my little piece of Texas sky. I want to keep it. There's other people that are being gentrification, and they can't afford their homes. They've been for generations. That's just wrong. But what we do, and we want to agree on, is that we want to pay our fair share, and we want to provide these infrastructures. And I will work with anyone at the legislature who has that goal in mind, and that's to make it fair and equitable for you. Right. And we have a property tax system that we can work with, which will deliver what we want.
Representative Nevárez, again, the issue in the last session that you all couldn't come to terms on was sending this back to the voters to decide above a certain point if you're going to allow local authorities to increase property taxes. What do you have against the will of the voters?
No, nothing. I mean, I think Senator's correct. It was an issue that I was working on it with several Republicans. I think we were on the right track. The problem was the lack of flexibility from the Senate on the number. I mean, 4% was untenable because
the Senate wanted 4, the House wanted 6, right?
Yeah, and so it would force. Imagine this and for no other reason than if you tell people I'm going to raise your taxes 0.5%, they'll vote no, and they probably should. But to have to run back to the voters to get every little thing done, one is the cost of elections in places like this. It's not tenable, and the other is you're not doing much to actually save them money. So when we were trying, we were perfectly fine with getting 6 on the board, and that was something that was worked across the aisles. And when somebody had flashed up an amendment, I think Bonin had the bill, and I ended up I killed the bill on a point of order because we had a deal. And of course, you know how deals sometimes go in the House or the Senate. From one minute to the next they evaporated. And I said, look, we have to deliver the ability for the locals, stay out of their way, let them set their tax rates the way they want to, but
Right.
but we have to be able to check them, but not check them unreasonably. I think the senator is on the right track that this is something we can work on together. But knowing this is, I mean, let's put it this way, I had county associations and members elected in counties that are redder than red coming to me saying, save me from my senator or from my state representative who does not want to listen to
Right.
a 6% or something more reasonable.
Right. Well, the reality is that if the voters at home don't like what the local authorities do on property taxes, they have a means to express that. It's called an election. The next time they vote that mayor, that council member out. Right. I mean, you could say that. So I see we have 10 minutes or so before we want to go to the audience for questions. I'm on the border. Too often the conversations about immigration are conducted not on the border. People whose lives are not directly in front of the issue often feel like they own the issue, whereas actually you all own the issue. This community and communities like it, and you represent a district that has a huge number of miles along the Texas-Mexico border, as do you. This is really ground zero for this conversation. I've noticed, Senator Flores, that we heard a lot about the caravan until Election Day, and I haven't heard about the caravan since. What happened?
That's an interesting question, which kind of goes to the motivation behind the caravan in the first place. But yes, we have 400 miles of Mexican border in Senate District 19.
You think you have a problem along those 400 miles with border security that needs to be solved?
As someone who's actually, I'll say this, I'm probably the only member of the legislature who's actually patrolled the Rio Grande. And I'm probably going to be the only member that's in a law enforcement capacity, and someone who's been in the brush and worked with the ranchers along and the communities in a law enforcement capacity. And yes, we do have a problem. You just go to some of these ranches and see how that they can't go out there and enjoy that with your families like we used to, and your camp houses getting broken into. Yeah. And it's not just the paisano who used to be back in the day when we were out there, I'll just say, I'll clarify. My wife was born in Mexico City. My great grandfather came from Bustamante, Nuevo León 2 generations ago. There's a right way to do things. The Republic of Mexico and a constitutional republic of the United States of America cannot function without secure borders. Right. No nation can.
Whose problem is it to fix? When President Obama was in the White House, I heard Republicans in Texas say this is a federal issue and the federal government should solve it. And because the federal government won't solve it, we're going to spend money out of the budget of Texas, not on education, not on health care, but on border security. And then we're going to send a bill to the federal government and make them pay. Now you have a Republican in the White House, and the last time I looked, we're still spending $800 million on border security. If it was a federal problem then, Senator Flores, isn't it still a federal problem now?
The federal problem is with the immigration laws per se of entry into the border. That is a federal problem. That's why we have the Border Patrol. But the penal code of Texas is a Texas problem. The criminal laws of our state, trespass, burglary, everything that goes along with our Texas penal code are the responsibility of state government, the sheriffs, the DPS.
So we have a place in this conversation.
What it is it's a fabric. Absolutely we have a place in this conversation.
Yeah.
We have to support our border sheriffs. We have to make sure that they have what they need to protect our communities. We have to enforce Texas law. And it's not about Texas officers enforcing federal law. It's about them enforcing Texas law.
Let me ask the vice chairman of the Homeland Security Committee whether he believes the homeland is secure. You are also somebody who has personal experience. You've talked to groups I've asked you to speak to about your own experience as a resident of this community. You know this issue personally from your personal life, do you not?
Well, yeah, I mean, if I warm my arm up enough, I can throw a rock and hit Mexico. I mean, I literally live right on the river. And so I have to disagree with some of the characterizations of how secure the border is and why. But I'll say this and the senator made a good point, that we have to support our border sheriffs. I worked with Dennis Bonnen on House Bill 10 2 sessions ago because I didn't agree with the bill, but I realized if I was not involved in the conversation,
This was a bill to fund border security.
if I was not involved in the conversation, then I was going to have some issues. And Senator Birdwell and Representative Bonin, Speaker Pro Tem Bonin, were good enough to allow me and some other border Democrats to really put our hands on the bill. And so, to the senator's end is, I agree, we have to support our border sheriffs. And one of the things that we tried to do as border Democrats is get more
Right.
money funneled into the sheriff's departments. And guess what? We couldn't do it. It stayed with the DPS. And so I'd be happy to work with the senator on that if we're going to do that. Now, do we need to spend $800 million? And the answer to that is no, because you made a very good point, Evan, and again, I'm beating a dead horse and mentioning Dennis Bonin again, but just Dennis happened to do this, is he had a big old a big old invoice. This is right before, right after the election and before Trump took office, saying, here's a bill to the federal government for what you owe us.
I think it was a couple $1 billion,
Yeah,
wasn't it?
and so just tell me when that check gets to Austin, then we cashed it. And the answer to that is we're not going to get it.
Hasn't
So-
come and it's not coming.
No, and so the conversation immediately shifted after Trump was sworn in to where they had been banging on the president for 8 years about this, and then suddenly we're a bunch of mutes, and we can't tell the federal government, come in here and do this. And look, to that end, the Border Patrol does an excellent job. They do an excellent job. But, and again, circling back to this idea about the caravan is, let's not confuse things and how they are. Is, do the people here coming in this caravan, if they reach a port of entry, are they doing something illegal? The answer to that is no. It's legal to ask for asylum. And I'll tell you this.
Although over the last couple of days, there seems to be a move to change that.
Exactly. But right now it's legal. And so, and I actually happen to agree that in some circumstances, some of these people in the caravan do not deserve to receive asylum. But that's a determination made at the bridge and then by an administrative law
Right.
judge, period. What bothered me about that is that as good people, and I don't care what religion you subscribe to or what spiritual bent you have, but if you couldn't parse out the fact that even if you disagreed with them getting the asylum, those were human beings. Some of them walking barefoot, and to villainize them in order to try to win an election was obscene. And so the reason we're not seeing it anymore is because Trump, finished beating that drum and he put it down and he's beating another one.
We're on to the next thing. Well, we do live in a world with both sides where we're constantly on to the next thing and on to the next. One more question before we go to all of you. We're going to have we have a microphone. We'll have one walked around to you. Senator Flores, you were elected in a special election in 2018 in October, and you're up on the ballot in 2020.
Yes, sir.
And you intend to seek re-election to that seat to a full term.
I am, yes.
Am I looking at the first debate of the 2020 election for Senate up here? Have I inadvertently convened? Representative Nevárez, will you commit right now that you are not going to run against Senator Flores?
I commit that right now.
No, say it into the mic.
Yeah, well, I commit that I've got a job to do, and the job is to represent, 12 counties in the legislature.
Yeah.
And I've told this to somebody right now. I said, look, we have a lot of work to do in this session, and there's a lot of things that I want to work with
Right.
Peter on this. And hell, if Pete helps me with some of this stuff, I'll carry him around my
Right.
shoulders all over town if that's what it takes.
But you didn't say no, I'm not running.
Look, I told my, somebody was telling me the other day they were getting upset at me and said, look, if XYZ doesn't happen, we're going to vote you out and you're going to go home. I said, you know what? Home's pretty good. Home's all right. And so, but I'll say this is I've got to take care of my constituents. The senator has to take care of his constituents, and that's what I'm going to do. And I
And then
think,
there's plenty of time to work all that other stuff out.
I mean, you know what? I was offered the opportunity or given the opportunity. If I'd wanted to run for senator, I would have. And the truth is my job is this, and I want to do it well, and I'm going to do it well. And I've got a place. There's a place for me there. And the truth is, the House is a lot more fun than the Senate.
Where is your sister? Your sister is right there.
There she is.
He didn't answer me. He didn't answer me. Okay, I tried, though. I asked about 5 different times. Okay. Jessica Weaver, my colleague in the back, has a microphone. We're going to use the balance of our time for your questions. Please put your hand up. We'll bring a microphone around to you, and we'd love to get you into the conversation. Sir.
Hello, Jose Landa for the
How about that?
Jose Landa for the Eagle Pass Newsgram. You were speaking about the Texas Penal Code, and how to enforce it, especially on immigration. Well, if you look at the Texas Penal Code, crossing the border is a misdemeanor. How do you balance that out, and which one do you go with?
Right.
Well, I've quite frankly, I'm not familiar with a Texas Penal Code statute about crossing an international border. To my knowledge, there's not one in the Penal Code so therefore that's not a Texas law. But what is Texas law is trespass once you cross onto private property. That's against the law. Criminal trespass, Texas is 97% privately owned, and you have the right to sovereignty in your own property and the right to decide who comes on it or not. That is Texas law. So folks, and that component but the actual crossing of the border itself is, to my knowledge, is not in the
Do you think it should be a misdemeanor, or should it be something more serious?
The crossing the international border in Texas law is not something that's in our purview.
No, but I'm asking you what you think. I'm asking you, do you think crossing at the border should be a misdemeanor, or should it be considered from a criminal standpoint something more serious?
I think that that the rule of law should be the basis of civilization, and
right.
and you cannot just cross into another sovereign nation without their
right.
consent.
And
That's just something that maintains our nationhood, and it's just it's civility, it's the
right.
rule of law, it's what keeps this civilization together. Now, like the representative said, a society is judged based on how they treat the most defenseless, and we have rules and we have laws in place for asylum. The system is already there, but what we're doing is we're not letting it work. And there's a lot of interference with that in the courts and in the law enforcement capacity, especially so if it works, then my great-grandfather crossed the border, immigrated here legally from Bustamante, Nuevo León, because the system worked. My wife came from Mexico City, had a green card when we were dating, and got her citizenship when she was 18. The system works. Right. Yes, it should be against the law.
Representative Nevárez, at election time, and not only at election time, Republicans like to say about Democrats like you're for open borders. Are you for open borders?
Of course not.
Okay, so where should we land along the continuum
the
versus crossing is totally fine open border here and the death penalty for crossing over here? Where are you along the continuum?
Let's get this straight right now.
Yeah.
Crossing an international boundary should be a felony, and it is a felony in federal court. It's a felony, and I don't care if you're from Mars, Mexico, or the U.S. If I got in the river and then tried to come back, if I set foot on the Mexican side, if I got dry on the Mexican side and I tried to come back across the river, even though I'm a U.S. citizen, I've committed a felony. You have to cross at the ports, period. I don't know the other day I went to go vote. Somebody's yelling at me, don't vote for Democrats, they're for open borders. Which Democrat is for open borders? I mean, I've never heard that. That people conflate the idea that the humanity of not villainizing people that are walking from God knows where, as opposed to what's going to happen to them when they get to the port. Those are two different things. So I agree with the senator. It shouldn't be a Texas law. It's a federal law. It's a felony. I mean, try it right now. There's a river right back here.
Don't try it.
I mean, and so. Do I agree though? No, I mean, am I for open borders? Not only will I say no, I say hell no.
Hell no. Okay. Question. Any hands up toward the back? Reporters for other news organizations get one question. Yes.
First of all, thank you so much for having this.
Sure.
forum.
It's pretty fun, huh?
Yes, it is.
If you care about this stuff, you nerd out on it, it's pretty good. So go ahead. Yeah.
I do want to say that I represent the superintendents, and I know we talked about more money, but the way I see it, the state has put accountability, and we're all for accountability. I mean, we're not shying away from it.
Right.
But the standards have been set, A through F. So why not?
What district do you represent?
Eagle Pass.
Eagle Pass. How were your schools rated generally in that system?
We scored an 87, which is a high B, and I'm very proud of it.
In high school, I would have killed for that.
Me too.
Right. Yeah.
But you know, it's, to me, it seems a little bit unfair that we set these standards and we don't fund, we don't give the money that is needed to, you know, for the teachers to be able to teach our students, for us to,
Right.
you know, renovate our buildings
Right.
and so on. So do we have a plan? You know, do we have a plan, because the next biennium is
Right.
around the corner.
Senator Flores, you know that the legislature decided at the conclusion of the special session in 2017 to study the problem of school finance. There's going to be now a presentation from the commission. Presumably, we understand that the governor's staff has been talking about school finance, and a presentation they've been taking out to various people. I mean, what the superintendent says is certainly right, that there are a lot of school districts that don't have enough money just to do the current job they've got. You have teachers, I mean, it's almost a joke at this point to say this, but it's true in a lot of places. Teachers have to spend their own money sometimes to buy supplies for their classes. Whatever the answer is, doesn't it seem broken to you?
Yes, it is. Yes, it does. And you know, I'll qualify by saying, you know, all six of my sisters are teachers, and I hear what they have to say. My wife Elizabeth was a teacher, but I look forward to seeing the findings. I mean, it's incumbent on me, and indeed my responsibility of myself, and I believe the representative, that we want to examine, you know, both sides of the tortilla, if you will, look at both sides on every issue, and I look forward to seeing what the committee, they put a lot of time and effort in there, and they listen to a lot of subject matter experts.
Traveled around the state a bunch.
I want to see it. I want to learn from it. I want to learn from you, superintendent. I want to know what you think. You might have the idea, you and the other superintendents, on the answer to this problem. You know, and that's what.
Yep.
So we have to listen to you. We have to take the time to read what other people have done, and then we need to have the strength to work together to solve this problem.
I see we've got 5 minutes. I want to try to take 2 more in that 5 minutes if we can do it. So let's go. Sir.
Yes, thanks all of you for being here. I represent the business sector of the school district. I've been working for the school district for about 25 years.
Yes.
And we've been able to see a lot here in Eagle Pass. So we've been fortunate. We have Mr. Nevárez on our board, and he was always very instrumental with everything that the school district
Yes.
did. And one of the things is, for everybody to understand, we've lowered taxes. We did that in 2005. We had to reduce our taxes by 33%. Our tax rate for school districts was $1.50 in the M&O, and we went all the way to $1 because
All right.
that was a legislature's point of looking at it.
You have a question,
Yes,
sir.
my question is that didn't help because we reduced our taxes, we got less money, they give us more states, so at the end, we didn't have more money to work with. So I would like for
I
y'all
want
to
you to.
consider that,
Right.
that when you're looking at that plan, we do need more funding.
Right.
We don't need to just reduce one type of funding and then make it up.
Right. Representative Nevárez, I mean, it is kind of a pig through a snake, ideally, right? It sort of moves from here to here unless you lower taxes and then surprise the state doesn't give you money, and then you end up in the hole for the amount.
And I can't give a better example than that. And it's like this is, and I'm going to drill down because that's what we're supposed to do, is drill down. And the drill down is this. The issue of, do we need more money? Yes, like we have to start there because it immediately takes care of this issue. Now, how much more? That's the debate we need to have. But the idea of we need to figure out some efficiency, yes, but it has to start with the premise that, look, we blew a big hole in this. And even districts that were trying to do, and I'm not saying this because I was on the district because I want to break my arm patting myself on the back. I can do that all day on other things, trust me. But I'm not going to do it on this one. But the truth is, districts like this and across our district, we're struggling with the idea of how do we do this even if we're at our best in terms of reducing taxes so that you, the local taxpayer, pay less taxes when the state is so inconsistent. And you know, now I'm on that side of it. You know, we have a lot of Chapter 41 schools in the district, and, you know, the senator now represents them as well. And because of the oil and gas boom, and they're faced with an issue, you know, in Fort Davis, you get an allotment for textbooks. And so they need money to hire a bus driver. God forbid in a small rural school district that you're the superintendent and you have a CDL, because guess what? You're going to be driving a bus. That's how we roll in the rural districts. And so the superintendent says, you know what? I've got this allotment for books. I have no flexibility to actually hire a bus driver. So he bought the whole allotment. It was $24,000 for books, and he lined the hallways with the books. They're useless. They serve no purpose because there's not enough students to use them, but we don't allow the district the flexibility to move that money somewhere they could use it, and that's our fault.
That's probably something you both agree on, is right? Giving
Well, with state government and
Yeah.
state government and the agencies, the executive directors are allowed. They have strategies, and then they're allowed to move either 10 or 15 or 20%, whatever the legislature allows them. So that model already exists in state government. It seems to me that model should exist in this as well.
Right.
The fact is, and the senator's hitting on a key point, and this is, we failed to do this in the last session, is we have to be more flexible. And the flexibility, one of the things that I think will help a district like, even though Eagle Pass Independent School District is not near being a Chapter 41, but allowing these schools that are right on the line the flexibility to opt into one plan or the other, because it gives you the opportunity, because when these districts have to send money back to the state, it cripples them. Because it really
Right.
does. And
Right.
and I'll give you an example. I think Fort Stockton ISD, they send their money to Presidio. It's basically a swap. And so to Ismael's point is, we will not effectively be able to reduce your taxes, until we step up and at least say we have to plug the hole. After that, you can talk efficiency and whatnot, but it's
Right.
like going to buy a loaf of bread and saying, you know what, I want to see how good you bake it, and how much the yeast rises, and say, then I'll figure out if I'm going to pay for it. But do it. Bake it, and then we'll figure out if we... No, you're already in for a penny, in for a pound. We got to be in.
I'm
and that's
glad
it.
that we fed you, because all this talk of bread would probably make you hungry. We have hit the 1 o'clock hour when we need to let people go back to their lives. What a great conversation, and it will be fun to see how these issues play out, and it would also be very serious in addition to being fun. Well, I'm afraid it's 1 o'clock. I'm very sorry. But you know what? I want to ask Senator Flores and Representative Nevárez, will you please make a beeline for this woman right here at the end?
She's my neighbor. She lives right next to
Oh,
me.
well, she can just come to the house, constituent service. Thank you to the Lucky Eagle Casino and to the Kickapoo for their generosity and hospitality. Thank you to Senator Flores, Representative Nevárez.
Thank you
Give him
all.
a big hand. And we'll come back to Eagle Pass. Thank you very much.
Big hand for the senator right here. Great job, bud. Appreciate it.